How are you today? We are all getting ready for our Thanksgiving holiday, and it's been such a busy time just getting started with Thanksgiving, leading up to the Christmas holidays. And I don't know about you, but I have seen every single company out there promoting their Black Friday specials. So I just want to let you know that we are not doing a Black Friday special. I want you to enjoy your holidays with your family and your friends. And we're certainly going to do some specials, but we're going to wait until after Thanksgiving because Thanksgiving is all about hanging out with your friends and your family and not worrying about the commercialism of the holidays. So you'll get a little reprieve from me. We're not going to talk anymore about specials until after Thanksgiving. So, what have I been doing in my studio? Well, I've been teaching a whole lot for my Ahead of the Curve members. And yesterday, I taught a class on free emotion quilting. So, I mentioned to them that I was going to teach them how to turn their corners beautifully with your feathers. And then I forgot to tell them. So we're going to do it here today. We're going to turn our corners beautifully with our feathers. And then we'll talk a little bit about those Inktense pencils that I have been playing with. And I'm excited about using them to accentuate my applique. So normally I use my Leaves Galore tools to make applique quilts. Yet these Leaves Galore tools make wonderful spines for your feathers. So it's really fun to talk about it's really fun to talk about quilting when we normally here on Sewing and Slippers are talking about applique. So let's get started with using the tools for some quilting designs. So the first thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to use my Leaves Galore tools to make my feathers go beautifully around the corners of my quilt. So I've got a couple of feather samples here, and it's a little difficult for you to see them on white, but I'm going to just lay them out anyway, and you let me know if you can see this okay on the white. The reason why I chose the white feathers that I already had quilted out is because I do want to talk about those Inktense pencils. And I know people are using them to color in their fabric when they're doing just a quilted piece of fabric. Then they're using the Inktense pencils to color in those quilted designs. But I want to talk about that later because the first thing I want to do is get into those feathers. So the Leaves Galore tool with the 2.5-inch curve, the petite Leaves Galore tool, makes a beautiful feather right here. I'm not sure you can see it. I hope the light is catching that feather just right. So that is the spine that I used for this feather right here. And then if you work your way up to the Norm Leaves Galore tool, and then finally to our Grand Leaves Galore tool, we've got two other sizes, or actually there are 6 total sizes that we can use for our feathered spines. So let's move up to the 3-inch here, and that's what the tiny little feather looks like with the 3-inch tool. And then we moved up to the 4-inch tool, and we got this feathered spine right here. So that is such a beautiful way to keep your feathers moving gracefully around your quilt. So how does that translate onto marking your fabric? Well, let's go ahead and get our fabric ready for marking right here. And you can see that I've already marked one line here on my fabric with my chalk tool. So the chalk tool that I generally use is the Quilter's chalk line. And I'm going to use that chalk tool in order to snap a line on our fabric. So let me just grab a pin here, and I'm going to move in 3 inches from the end of my fabric, because I want to draw a chalk line that's going to go across that fabric at the 3-inch line in order to make my feather go gracefully around the curve. So you can do that with the chalk line. You could also do that with your regular old rulers and a chalk marker. Now my favorite chalk marker comes with the chalk line, and it's a nice little handheld marker like this. You take the top off and you fill it up with powdered chalk. Now the powdered chalk that I sell with my chalk line is iron erasable chalk. So no matter which tool you use, the chalk line itself for straight line marking or the little chalk wheel can also use that for straight line marking. But I'm going to show you how we're going to use that for our curved lines. So I want to make sure that I have a perfect 90-degree angle here at the corner. And my first marking was a little bit off. I made that mark yesterday and then I put it on the board, so I didn't have it quite accurate. Now that powdered chalk, it makes a mess. Like that powdered chalk can get everywhere. However, because it's iron erasable, even though it's on the rest of my fabric right here, all I need to do is take my really hot iron, and I just turned it on, so it's not quite really hot yet, but yeah, there we go. And it just takes off all of that excess or powdered chalk off of your fabric. So it's very easy, even though it can be a little bit messy at first when you first fill up your chalk tools, because oftentimes we overfill them, so we have too much line. So there's a centering line. So there's a centering line right down the center of the 3-inch curve. And then we're going to find the end of that 3-inch curve right here. And my tool ends at the letter, my curve ends at the letter I on the tool. So there's a 3-inch leaf right here outlined with a dashed line. You've got the number 3 in the middle of that curve. We're going to follow that curve down to the end. So it starts in the middle with an A. It goes B, C, D, E, F, G, H, I. That curve ends at the letter I, and then it goes backwards up to A again. But we're looking for the little letter I, and there's a dashed line that goes all the way across your tool at the letter I. Let's place that letter I right at the 90-degree corner. So we marked our chalk line this way and this way with a nice 90-degree corner. And now I'm going to place the centering line up and down here on this chalk line, and I'm going to place the letter I over here on this chalk line. So that's my corner right there. So I've got a straight line here and a straight line here, making a 90-degree angle on my tool, and I place that right on the 90-degree angle on my fabric. And let's go ahead and mark that curve. Okay, there we go. Now remember, I made a new straight line. So this initial line, let me get rid of that. You know, we need to get rid of it with the hot iron. So I can just go ahead and iron that off. And so I'm going with this nice dark line that you see right here. Now I'm going to do the same thing the other way. I'm going to take that 3-inch curve. I'm going to place the centering line of the curve right on the line that I've just marked, and I'm going to stop right here at the letter I. So I end this way with the outside curve, and now I'm going to end this way with an outside curve. So that letter I is following on this line right here, and now the centering line for the 3-inch curve is following on this line, that 90-degree angle. And what I'm able to do by using that letter I at the intersection of these two lines is create that beautiful rounded curve on all 4 corners of my quilt. Now, if I had another corner over on this side of my quilt. Like I'm just picturing this quilt just goes off, king size quilt. It goes off in both directions. But say this was the full size of my quilt. I would need to mark my line 3 inches from this end over here, mark my 90-degree curve, and then I would do the same thing with this rounded curve on both edges. Now, what happens in the middle? Well, first of all, you can measure the side of your quilt, 3 inches in this way, 3 inches in this way. So what is the space right there between the two corners? Once you have that space between your two corners, you're going to see which tool is going to work best for that space. So say you divide that number by 3. Say that is 21 inches. You're going to have 7 3-inch curves in that 21 inches. So you're going to be able to put full curves all the way across. But say you only had 20 inches. Instead of putting the curves all the way across, you're going to start in one corner, you're going to start in the other corner, and you're just going to meet in the middle and make that small adjustment to your curves. So you would have to adjust that curve 1 inch overall. But you have 7 curves to work with. So if you just adjust each one slightly, just the tiniest amount, then you're going to be able to make up for that 1 inch difference. So I've made this beautiful rounded corner so that when I'm making my feathers, I'm going to go up and down and around, up and down and around, like the half of a heart. So up and around and down. And when I come down, I'm going to come down at an angle where I'm just going to be able to continue right along that spine. So when I'm coming up and around and down, I want to gracefully curve my feather petal right back into that spine. So up and down and around into the spine. Then I'm going to trace up and down and around one more time. And as I'm coming into that spine, I'm angling right along the edge of that spine to make it nice and graceful. So once you have learned to do half of a heart over and over and over again, it makes for a beautiful feather design with just that one thing, just that half of a heart. Let me grab my pencil here. So let's do it on paper. It might be a little bit easier to see than on my fabric because that chalk marker wasn't meant to draw every single little feather. It was meant to it just goes in one direction. That one's really made for straight lines or gentle curves. It's not really meant to go around curves. So as I have my spine, when I go up and down and around, what I'm making is half of a heart. And that heart has a nice curved edge. So when I go up and down and around, when I come back into that spine, I'm going to follow that spine. I'm going to come in right at an angle that gracefully lays that feather right along the spine. So learning to do half of a heart, half of a heart, half of a heart over and over and over again gains that muscle memory that you need in order to make that half of a heart along that spine. Now, because the tools are so graceful, you're not going to get into a situation where you need to have other shapes in there other than half of a heart coming into your spine. But the nice thing is you can create a variety of spines with these tools as well. You can place your spines a little bit apart, and then we can go ahead and fill in those spines with our little pearls. Let's just do a few little pearls right there. Okay, that makes a beautiful feather design. Then, if you don't want just a single spine and you want to play you can do a little ribbon spine. Just pull that tool down a little bit, make that ribbon shape for your spine, and then you have the opportunity to fill that one in the very same way. Half of a heart, half of a heart, half of a heart, and they gracefully lay right along that spine. Now, once you have your feathers perfected in one direction, you really need to practice that half of a heart in the opposite direction. Now, you never want to have to make these heart shapes match up. You're never going to make a full heart with those shapes. They don't need to match up, and they shouldn't match up along the edges of your spine because they are made to be feathers and not hearts. The shape is half of a heart, and it's easy to practice that and get used to drawing that shape so you can fill in the space around your feather. Now, whether you do a ribbon spine or a single spine, or you fill your spine with pebbles, these tools can really give you a hand getting that spine marked and going all the way along those corners. So let's take a look now at the one that I've already done on the white. And we've done the spine in the 2.5 inch spine, the 3-inch spine, and over here the 4-inch spine. I kept the feathers really, really tight. They're very, very close to the spine, giving you a really traditional look. And I'm curious what's going to happen if we try to fill those with the Inktense pencils. Gosh, I thought I had my pencils right here, and I have misplaced them. Hold on just a second. Let me find that box. Oh my goodness, they are missing. I had them here just a moment ago. Okay, so let's do something different. The Inktense pencils are escaping me right now, so I want to go ahead and play with that chalk line. Let's go back to marking our grid with that chalk line. As I was rummaging through my fabrics today, I found these pre-cut shapes. So I would love to play with all of my red pre-cut shapes. I do a lot of demonstrating. And when I'm demonstrating my hearts and more tools, the shape that I most commonly demonstrate is using template B from the 4-piece set. And on template B, I have a circle shape that is 2.5 inches. Well, isn't that fun that one of my tools is also 2.5 inches on that curve? So when I demonstrate, I just throw all of these circles into a little container, and then at the end of the year, look at this, I've got hundreds of little circles, and I'm pulling out all of the ones that I cut from fabrics that are in the red family. So I'm going to throw some reds and oranges and yellows together, and let's go ahead and play with that shape. Okay, loads and loads of red 2.5 inch circles. Those are a little bit bigger, but I could cut those down into these two. They're a beautiful red, but they're a little bit bigger. But I could go ahead and cut those down into that 2.5 inch shape. So using my quilter's chalk line, I can go ahead on my background fabric and I can draw lines every 2.5 inches. So what we would be doing is making a 2.5 inch grid on our background fabric. Now let's see, there's my half, 2.5. So we're going to draw a grid this way, and then we would also go the other way. So we've got our one line here, and then we've got our 2.5 this way. So we're going to easily make a little 2.5 inch grid on our background fabric. And I think it would be so much fun to make a quilt on that 2.5 inch grid just with our circles. So we would fill each little grid segment with our 2.5 inch circles. I've been dying to make a quilt like this because I have all of these circles as a demonstration piece, and maybe some of them aren't perfect. That's okay. I could always recut those that are not perfect. But I think it would be great fun to do a 9 patch of circles, or even 16, or maybe 25. Wouldn't this make a lovely charity quilt or comfort quilt in a little modern style? It's not your traditional comfort quilt. It's something a little bit unusual, a little bit fun, a little different, and this would be so easy to stitch in order to make this into a donation quilt. Now, I love throwing just a little bit of color in there. We've got some oranges, we've got our reds. Boy, I wish I had some more true reds in here. I don't seem to have a whole lot of true reds, but that's okay. We're going to use these oranges and yellows along with our reds. There we go. And just make that pretty little grid. So I did a 4x4 grid with just 16. And I think that this would make such an awesome quilt block in order to do a more modern comfort quilt. Now, I love it on the black. It's just leaving a little bit of black between those spaces. And I think what I probably would do is give myself about a 1/2 inch border and make, I think, probably 25. I'd probably go ahead and make another row here. And we would do 25 circles, 5x5. And then that would make just such a fabulous quilt block. Gosh, I'm gonna have to grab some more reds. Yeah, that one's a little bit pink, although it adds a little something, doesn't it? So I kind of don't mind having the pinks in there. And I think that a 5x5 quilt block with the 2.5 inch circles. So let's see, what is that? 2.5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 times makes a fabulous size quilt block. I've got a couple more here that I'll probably cut down. I don't think, oh yeah, there's a couple more reds in here. Okay, so once we have our design laid out, the Misty Fuse is my favorite fusible web because it creates a block that is not only secure for your stitching, but it's also very soft in the finished quilt. So I would fuse these right down to this background, and then I would do some decorative machine stitching. So let's talk about the order of decorative machine stitching for this block. You could start here with your blanket stitching and go all the way up and around, but then once you get here, you're going to be stuck. So I think what I would do for my blanket stitching is go down half of the circle, and then go down the next half, and the next half, and do one row at a time with half of a circle in each direction, and here. Now, we could get to here and transfer right over to here and get this row done. That way we're going in a continuous sequence here, go up to here, and go down and around like this, and make that go all the way continuously until we get back up to here. Then we could come down and around and finish off this outermost edge. So we could truly do that blanket stitching all in one pass. Now I just love the look of those dots. And that's a quilt that I've been wanting, a quilt block that I've been wanting to make for some time now. So can you imagine how simple that would be if you just cut out all of those circles? Probably take you about maybe a half an hour to cut out all of those circles with the Hearts and More template B. That quilt would go together so beautifully. Now, when I'm looking at my feathers, I usually make my feathers go along that continuous curve, that serpentine line, like we've done here in our notebook. But what would happen if we decided to feather outside of these circles? So instead of having a serpentine line, let's go ahead and draw this because I think that this would be really, really fun. Instead of doing just a serpentine line, what if we did our inside and then our outside curve so that we ended up with a scallop instead of a serpentine? By tracing that tool twice, we end up with a scalloped edge that goes, maybe a darker pen would help, but let me just darken it up with my pencil. So it's going to go out every time. We've got out and out and out. Now, to turn our corner, we're going to do the exact same thing we did before. We are going to design it just like we did before, but then we're going to repeat. Instead of just having that serpentine line, we're going to slide that tool down by one leaf shape. We're going to repeat that outside curve as well, and then erase the inside curve. So that's how you go about making a scalloped edge for your quilt. And that's what this ends up being with the circles. We end up with this scalloped edge right here. And I think it would be really fun to draw our little tiny feathers, just like I did on that white fabric, and make that pretty little scallop. Now, in these inside points, you would probably need to do some other little decorative element. So I'm coming out with a little leaf shape right out from the center. And let's think about how we would go about feathering this design. Well, we could certainly break our feather right in the middle of that curve. So I'm going to place a leaf there, right there in the middle of that curve. And then I'm going to feather in one direction away from that leaf. And then I'm going to feather the other direction away from that leaf. Oh my gosh, I think that would be such a pretty quilting design around this scalloped edge. Let's do this one. Okay, now this is in miniature, right? This is a really small curve. But can you imagine that with the 5-inch curve, or even the 6-inch curve, and for a larger quilt, that beautiful 8-inch curve? So instead of going in a serpentine line, we would go 8 inches up like this, 8 inches up again, and 8 inches up again. That would give us this beautiful edge where we could feather going in both directions away from that center point of that curve. Oh my goodness, that would be just so beautiful. And I was picturing that as I was making my circle quilt. imagine doing a little feather design all the way around this edge. Or maybe we want to keep it a little bit more modern and just do some walking foot quilting right through the centers of those circles. You could actually create a really nice square inside of a square pattern. But I love it when you blend a modern pattern and the circles with a traditional pattern like the feathers. It really is unexpected, it's something different, and it's really fun to mix those two different techniques. So I hope you've had fun doing some feathers today. I wanted to show my students in that machine quilting class how I turn the corner with those feathers, and that led me to playing with my circles. Now that my Inktense pencils are, oh, I just found them. They were missing, so I decided to go with the circles instead. So grab yourself your circle cutting tool, and then you can make a quilt block like this simply and easily. Whether or not you blend your traditional design, your feathers, with a more modern design like this, I hope that you will create something new and different and fun for your next applique quilt. Until next time, I will see you again soon.